The first week of the VNL was really bad for the Maple Volleys. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. It was bad. It was frustrating to watch, right? Going 3-1 isn't great at any times. Going 3-1 at home is even worse. And going 3-1 at home after all of the stars come back, if you have the most complete team you can, is just not how I thought this tournament was going to start for the Canadian men's national volleyball team. Now, going 3-1 at home in Ottawa specifically isn't anything new. I mean, we saw it back in 2022. We saw it back in 2023 as well. But as I said, this is not how I thought this team was going to start, especially when you're bringing back guys like Stephen Marr, like Eric Lepke, like Danny Demyanenko. Sho was in the lineup for the first time in the VNL. Arthur Schwartz, while we didn't see him last week, is somewhere in the mix as well. Like, this, to me, was the team that was finally going to break out and really compete with some of the best teams in the world. And honestly, I know it was late. As I said, I've been having some difficulties with my editing software, but that is the reason why I wanted to make sure I got my preview out that I filmed. I mean, I filmed the first one like weeks ago. It was a whole ordeal, don't get me started. But the reason I wanted to get it out was to show you guys how much I believe in this team and how good I think we can be. But we definitely did not show it in week 1 in Ottawa. And it's frustrating because this is not a 1-3 team. I know it, you know it, the Discord knows it, people in the comments know it. This is not a 1-3 team. At the very least, this team should be 2-2. Honestly, probably should be 3-1. And now maybe I'm biased, but I definitely think going 4-0 was on the table in week 1 for Team Canada in Ottawa. They had a chance to win every single match. And honestly, I think that's what makes it the most frustrating. After week 1, Canada currently sits in 13th. They are 3-1. They do have 6 points, though. That is the benefit of losing 3 games in 5. You get a point for every single one of them, and you don't lose nearly as many ranking points either. So they are 1-3, and with 6 points, if we are going off of points, Canada would currently be sitting in 10th. I'm just going to run through some of these matches real quick. First and foremost, the opener against Germany, and this one was a tough watch. It was just a sloppy game for Canada. They made 37 errors altogether, right? Opponent errors. That means it's Canada's errors. 20 serving errors, only getting 3 aces for 20 errors, and then 16 attack errors. One of them must have been a net touch out there somewhere. So it was just a sloppy game all around by Team Canada. They averaged 7.4 errors per set in this match. And now 52% of the offense went to Marr and Lepke on the outside. And I mean, it makes sense that the 2 stars, they're coming back. They went a combined 26 for 61, hitting a 42% with a 19.7% efficiency. It was not pretty. But over the course of the game, I thought, we saw Xander Kaczynski come in. Sho did get the start. He was good for a little bit. I mean, he had 14 points at the end of the day. He was 9 for 20 with a 20% efficiency. Not great, but he did have 4 blocks. And then I thought Xander came in and did a fantastic job. He was 9 for 16 with no errors. So we already saw the glimpses of what could be with a 1-2 punch on the right side for Team Canada. Although we did kind of see a couple of themes. First and foremost, it seems that Elgert is going to be paired with Sho and Luke Herr is paired with Xander Kaczynski. That was pretty much what we saw all week from Team Canada. I'm not entirely sure why that's the case, but it's mostly what we saw. And then another thing is, other than switching the setters and the opposites, we saw no subs from Team Canada, using none of that depth. And that is something that I'm going to be talking about relentlessly in this video. Also, this video is going to be long. This is going to be a long one. Now, match 2 was a lot better. And I mean, it pretty much mirrored exactly what the women did in Quebec City. They go to 5 against Germany, lose a tough one, and then bounce back in the Thursday match to beat one of the best teams in the world. And that's exactly what Canada did. This was hands down their best match, and really almost adds to the frustration because of how good they were in this match against France. They dominated up and down this match. They outkilled France. They got way more blocks than France. Serving was a little sus, and I mean, that was a big issue for Canada all week. They made less errors, only 22 errors in this match, only 5.5 errors per set against France. So that is a huge difference, making 2 less errors per set. That often is what's going to be the difference between winning and losing, and it definitely was for Canada in this one. I thought hands down this was the best match by Eric Lepke. I mean, he went 15 for 27, hit 56% with a 48% efficiency. That's what we come to expect from Eric Lepke. I mean, Xander Kitrzinski was awesome in this one. He got the start. He led the match with 20 points. He was 17 for 30, maybe not that efficient at 36%, but still really good. Stephen Maher was better than the first match. He was super solid, especially in serve receive. He was 12 for 25. Jackson Howe was ridiculous, 6 for 8 in attacking and 4 blocks. Jackson Howe, I think, might have been the best Canadian player all week long consistently. And just up and down, Canada made France look silly. They were dominant on both sides of the ball. They blocked well. They swung well. It was just an all-around great performance by Team Canada. And then USA versus Canada is where everything got derailed. And I'm pretty sure most of you are here just because you want to hear me talk about USA versus Canada. Now, I actually did record a video after this match was done. I recorded it like an hour or two after the match was done. I went and had a shower, helped my partner get dinner ready, and then I was like, I need to record something. And honestly, I think it was just a cathartic moment because I sounded like a Dan Lewis timeout. It was very profane and I was heated. So I honestly don't think I'm going to post it. But this one was frustrating. This one was really frustrating. Canada went up 2-0, absolutely dominated the first set, and they were leading 17-10. 17-10 in the second, just dominating the match. And then the next thing you know, they just opened the doors up a little bit. They went from 17-10 to then it was 19-15 and went from 19-15 to 19-19, all off of the U.S.'s blocking. The first one was an Ethan Champlin block on Kitrzinski on the right side, and then it was 3 straight blocks by Cole Hartke, who was outstanding in the match against Eric Lepke. And just like that, you could just see all of the wind come out of Canada's sails. Now, they did bounce back really, really well. Not immediately, but they fought all the way to a 35-33 set win. And honestly, this is where I thought it was going to be over. I was doing a watch along for this. And I even said, it is really tough to come back like that and lose a long set. I was expecting Canada to close the door and win in 3. The U.S. took the third. It was a bit of a back and forth. The U.S. had the lead. Canada came back, let it slip out their hands. And then in the fourth, it looked like everything was gravy. It looked like everything was going. They had a 14-10 lead, and then it just slipped away. It went from 14-10 for Canada to 17-15 and the only point in there for Canada was a Cole Hartke centerline violation. I mean, interestingly enough, both of these comebacks by the U.S. were started by Jackson Howe errors, which kind of sucks because Howe was outstanding. Those were his only 2 errors of the match and only 3 in the entire week, but it's just kind of funny how that happened. But Cole Hartke, turned things around in the second with his blocking 3 straight blocks on Lepke, and then turned things around with 2 aces back to back in the fourth. And Canada went from being up 14-10 to trailing 19-17, let the door back open in the fifth, went down 5-1, tied it up at 8-8, and then just let the U.S. run away with it. It was a frustrating match overall. And then to wrap things up, it was just a really sloppy match against Turkey in the last one. And this one was frustrating because the sets where Canada was good, they were really good. I mean, the first, we saw a bit of a stinker from Stephen Maher. Maher was 1 for 7 in attack with a negative efficiency. He was bad in serve receive, which was a little surprising because he was super solid in serve receive all week long. And finally against Turkey, we saw Dan Lewis go to the bench and bring in Jackson Young. Now, Young was outstanding. He was the best player on the floor for Canada in this one with 18 points, but it was just a back and forth affair. As I said, when Canada was good, they were really good. And when they were bad, they were really bad. Turkey is a really good blocking team, and it made it all the worse that it was hands down Canada's worst passing match of the tournament. They were past 28% positive and 12% perfect, which was a far cry from what was happening throughout the rest of the 3 matches for Canada. And I mean, they had the chance to put it away too. They dominated the fourth set 25-14, and then everything turned around and Turkey jumped out to another big lead in the fifth, where Canada was really just not effective offensively at all, and they let Turkey beat them on home, and Canada finishes 1-3 over the week. Now, I can live with the loss to Germany. I really can. Like what Daddy said after the Canadian women's loss to Germany in their first match in Quebec City, it's always really tough being a North American team playing a European team in that first match because we don't really play a lot of warm-up matches. There's just two compared to teams like Germany who get to play, three, four, five potentially in leading up to the VNL. And just being in Europe, like they're a lot closer, so they get together earlier. And I can even live with the loss to Turkey. I mean, it was back and forth. We saw the injury to Landon Curry in that one, kind of shook things up, had to bring in Zach Hollins. Mara wasn't playing great, although Young came in and did a great job off the bench. Once again, depth. We're going to talk about it. And it was just one of those ones, like the fifth set just kind of slipped away, a few bang bang plays here and there, and then all of a sudden you're losing by a lot. So while it was ugly and while it shouldn't have happened, still, I can still live with it. But the loss to the US is an absolute dagger. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it in any way. That one was frustrating, right? The reality is, whenever Canada and the US play in any sport, it's going to be a big deal, but specifically in men's volleyball because they're a lot closer, right? I mean, these two teams are very much like 50-50 against each other in the past number of years. Canada got a 3-1 win against this team back in 2024 in Ottawa. Like, we've seen them beat the US on a number of occasions, even with their full lineup. And to be honest, this matchup is a lot bigger right now because of the political climate. And I was hearing that a lot of the American players were running their mouths and talking a lot of shit after the warm-up matches in Gatineau on the preceding weekend. So the fact that the US runs out with their bench and we dominate for a set and a half and then let them come back and reverse sweep us after we win the set 35-33 is an absolute dagger, right? We let them off the hook in the third. We led the match in the fourth and should have closed it off, right? The 14-10 was a huge stuff block by Danny Demyanenko and Stephen Marr on Cole Hartke. And Hartke lit us up the entire time. And I thought, hey, finally, this is it. We're finally getting him. We're going to shut the door. But we didn't at all. We let them right back into the match. So now this American team has so much more ammo and just has so much more swagger when it comes to playing against Canada. And it was really, really frustrating to watch. On top of all that, had Canada been able to pull off the match 3-0, the ranking points they would have gotten would have been massive. It would have been like 15 plus points, and it really would have helped Canada move up in the world rankings, which, as we know, is really important for qualifying for the Olympics. So since then, I've spent some time, watching some video, going over the film and pinpointing some of our issues without just being emotional about it. Now, there's a few things that I want to look at. First and foremost, our offense is a big issue. Our side-out offense is an issue. In transition, it's even worse. Now, over the course of the 4 matches, we hit a 48% as a team with a 32% efficiency. The 32% efficiency was 12th in the VNL over the course of the first week. And how do I know that? I literally went and made a spreadsheet with featuring all the stats from every single team. So when I talk about these stats, I know exactly where we stand in the, relative to some of the other teams in the world. I found the biggest issues was that our offense is really slow to the pins, right? Her especially. And now I think there's going to be a lot of focus on the setters. And as I said in my preview video, I think Her is the more accurate setter. But he sets a much slower ball, especially when you see sets from guys like Max Elger or like Andrew Rowan or Micah Ma'a. They really shoot the ball to the outside, whereas a much slower ball by Luke Her that dies inside. And for me, really what causes a problem for guys like Eric Lepke. He's used to hitting a ball that's kind of shooting past the antenna that he can cut off and attack. And it kind of limits his options. Because it's so slow, our outsides are often hitting against 2 blocks. And then we throw so much volume out to the left side. So many of our sets just go to the left side, left side over and over and over again. I mean, that's what we saw when the US got back into the second set, right? Just fed Lepke. And It was a little bit situational. The passing wasn't fantastic, but still, there's so much reliance on our left sides. Our left sides represent over 50% of our offense. I also find that Canada's offense is very stationary, right? There's really not that much movement. They don't move the left sides, to the pin and inside, especially down the middle. We're only running 51s. It's only 51s. You see the occasional 31 by Jackson Howell, but never anything with Danny Damianenko, which is wild considering 31 was his bread and butter this season, playing for Resovia and having Marcignanu set him. So it's crazy that there's no movement, and especially because Canada could be a much more right side dominant team, and especially with Shaw, with the height of the set that he requires, it makes so much more sense to create a little bit more separation, run a 31, create a bit of a gap, run a higher set for Shaw so he's not always hitting against a two-man block. But that's always the case because any team's middles just can camp to block the 51, and once it get outside, the set's so high that they just need to shuffle over, get two sets of hands up on him. And then additionally, it's very clear to me that this team has a hard time setting Shaw. The best setting of Shaw we saw was in set 1, but both Elgert and her kind of struggled with it. This isn't anything new with Siobhan Vernon-Evans. This is something that we've seen with past Canadian teams and with his pro teams. I mean, when you go all the way back to 2017, when he really broke onto the scene, that was an interesting year because he actually had better numbers with the senior team playing in the World League, where TJ Sanders was setting him, compared to being on the junior team that summer where they played at the Pan Am Cup. And I'm pretty sure it was CJ Gavlis who was setting him at the time, just because TJ knew exactly what situations to run Shaw in, and then could also set that high ball outside to the pin that Siobhan Vernon-Evans really likes, right? And I mean, it's kind of a natural. He's so long and touches so high. He's also not the most explosive guy, right? It takes him a little bit more time to get off the ground, that he needs that higher ball just to be able to give him those options. And I mean, I think we saw it in his numbers too. As I said, I thought his best match was against Germany, and earlier on he was great. He was 9 for 20, but he did only have a 20% efficiency, and he ended the first week hitting 17 for 41, hitting 41% with a 20% efficiency. But I do think he's much better in the block and in serve than Xander. Canada's defense and transition is such an issue as well. There was 4 or 5 balls that were just completely left dropped against the United States, where a good dig was made and then nobody got to it, where guys were bumping into each other or the ball was just falling. It was incredibly frustrating to watch, and you could tell the guys on the court, like Mara, was visibly frustrated in those moments as well, and it was just deflating for Team Canada time and time again. And then I talked about the middles just running 51s. Like, when I was doing my video, the most blocks other teams got on our middles were in transition, because they knew on a good pass, her was going to run a 51, and they were full commit block on Demianenko and Howe, and that's how they were shutting them down. So not only was our defense subpar, in my opinion, and honestly, I think that is some tactical things I'll talk about in a little bit, but also when we had those opportunities to make plays in transition, we weren't taking them. Now, our serving wasn't terrible in week 1, I would say, but it could definitely score some more. Out of all of the teams in the VNL, we are last, 18th in aces per set, averaging just 0.68 aces per set. And it's also not because we're trying not to make any errors. We were 12th in errors per set. We were 10th in efficiency with a minus 12%, and a 5.6 ace to error ratio is not good. That really isn't good. However, I will say it didn't affect us as much in other teams' serve receive as I thought it would have. They were all pretty much the same. I mean, Germany was a 42% positive and a 24% perfect. France was a 44% positive and a 25% perfect. The US was a 44% positive and a 27% perfect. And the Turkey was a 42% positive and a 27% perfect as well. So very standard numbers across the board. That's why I don't think it's like the biggest deal. We could definitely put a little bit more pressure on. We could miss a little less serves, or if we're going to miss that many, make a few more aces. But overall, I don't think it's the biggest deal. But overall, I think Canada's biggest issue in this week was roster management. Now, I have gone on and on about the depth on this team. There is so much depth. There is so many guys to go to, and we did not see it in week number 1. You would have no idea that Canada's bench is filled with left sides who start for their teams, go to cup finals, go to league finals, play in the Champions League, have played the VNL before, have played in the World Championships, you would have no idea that these guys are there because we only really saw Mar and Lepke on the left side. Finally, we got a little bit of Jackson Young against Turkiye, but it was incredibly frustrating, the lack of substitutions and the lack of roster management we saw from Dan Lewis in week number 1. And I'll be very honest, it was not a great week for Lewis in week number 1. I thought his game management needs to be a lot better. Truth be told, I thought the USA game was one of the worst managed matches I have ever seen from Team Canada. Like, first and foremost, why did we keep Lepke in? Lepke got blocked 3 times in a row, and yet we kept him in. Like, he was looking tired at that point in the match. It was set number 3. It was their 3rd match. He had already played 9 sets in the other 2 matches. So this was now his 12th set in just 4 days. Like, sub him out. Bring anyone else back in. And then furthermore, why are we shoving the ball down his throat? Against the US, Lepke was 12 for 46 with a 0% efficiency. He was blocked 9 times and he didn't get subbed out. I just could not believe it. I didn't understand why he was just left out there. And then on the flip side, Xander gets pulled the minute he gets blocked, right? He was blocked 3 times in the match. 2 of those occasions, he was subbed out immediately. It didn't make any sense at all. As I said before, this is the deepest team we ever had in the VNL. If Lepke gets blocked 3 times in a row, why aren't we bringing in Brody Hofer, who led this team in scoring last year? Why aren't we bringing in a Jackson Young, who played in the best blocking league in the world this year in the Plus Liga and started in the finals for Lublin? Hell, why aren't we bringing in a guy like Eric Sisna, who I think needs a bit of more of a shot to just solidify that serve receive and just let him get a bit of a chance? Like, why aren't we using the depth when Lepke is just not having his best day? The next thing now, Cole Hartke tore Canada apart. He was a blocking menace. He was serving well. Offensively, he killed Canada. And I have no idea why there was no adjustments made to Hartke swinging on the right side. Now, I'm not going to say he doesn't have shots, but he's a 20-year-old player who still has a lot to learn. And the American setters were doing a really, really good job of putting in a position to be successful. They were setting him high, tight against the block. He was really using, there was 2 scenarios. Either he had Mar in front of him and he was just hitting high seam, or he had Lepke in front of him and he was just going straight OT. And to be honest, I don't think our blocking on him was terrible. Once again, Hartke hits a really high ball. He's going to be tough to stop, and we did get some touches on him. However, our 6 defense was brutal. After years of seeing this team play for Glenn Hogue and seeing our guys in 6 with their heels or their toes on the baseline, it's crazy me to see Mar or Lepke like a meter or a meter and a half up from the baseline, and the amount of times, those guys were having to reach back to try to dig a ball, or a ball was landing behind them or was going off the block and out the back, was incredible. I have no idea why Canada didn't adjust their defensive scheme, because as we're going to talk about later, Canada was the best blocking team in week 1. The blocking was actually fantastic by Team Canada. So if we're going to be able to block that well, and you've got basically a 7-footer, you got a big monster on the right side who's just going straight OT, why aren't we moving our 6th guy back to be able to make some scoops? It was incredible that no adjustments were made. None whatsoever. And finally, now I know I'm going to be calling a kettle black here, but I'm not an international volleyball coach. Dan Lewis mismanaged the ref during the USA game. And I'm not even going to talk about the reffing because it has been consistently terrible throughout this VNL. No one knows what this new rule means. I mean, at one point, this referee stopped a play because the US was complaining about a baseline violation on a serve, and it ended up being a reserve, even though we were getting a free ball over. It was bad. But Lewis is mismanaging the ref. He is getting upset with them too often. And at one point, on that very play, he was like, if you call this point, or if you call a reserve, we're going to go ballistic, which is not the best thing to say to a referee. It doesn't get you any further. Once again, pot calling a kettle black, but I'm not an international volleyball coach. And then he just kind of makes some silly challenges too. Thank God, we've got Mendez's son who starts making some really good, objective challenges, especially against Turkey. But there's certain times where he's just calling a challenge because he wants a timeout, and it's hurt us later in the set. Now, Dan Lewis is Dan Lewis. He is going to be emotional. That's how he's always been. That's how he was as a player. That's how he was when he first started coaching this team all the way back at the World Cup in 2019. That's how he was with the B team. He is going to be emotional. That's just how it is. But it was just a little too far. And honestly, I think he just puts a lot of pressure on himself because he cares the most about this team. Like, this is a guy who's been in the program since Glenn took it over, and before that, who spent the most time in Gatineau, who's dedicated the most minutes to the Maple Volleys. So I think he sees, the team's success as very personal, which I honestly love. I love that, but we just need him to dial it back a little bit. And we see the other side of it too. When Canada was dominating against France, Dan Lewis calls some amazing timeouts, right? And I love when Dan Lewis is just calm because he's analytical and he's smart. His timeouts are full of information. People in the Discord are talking about, people in the comments are talking about it. I'm seeing it. I love when Dan Lewis is on his game and he's dialed in. I love his timeouts because it's so direct. There's so much good information. Now, I know a lot of people were upset about the amount of F-bombs. I don't give a shit. Fucking swear all you want. It's a timeout. This is professional sport. It is what it is. I just think there's too many moments where he's getting too emotional and it's affecting the rest of the team. I think that's exactly what happened against the US and against Turkey. And ultimately, I just think it's a bit of a learning moment for Lewis. In the grand scheme of things, he's still a relatively new coach. Other than coaching a little bit with the B team and then the past 2 years in France, now this team, he actually hasn't been the head coach quite a bit. I still have full confidence in him to be the guy to lead this team. But this past week, I think, was definitely a learning moment. Past that, looking at some of the performances by some of the guys, starting with Lepke, I honestly think this was one of the worst weeks of volleyball I have seen from Eric Lepke in a long, long time. I haven't seen him this bad since Canada played against Italy at the 2022 World Championships, and he was just coming off an injury at that point. I have no idea why he was out there the entire time. It was crazy to me. He technically was Canada's leading scorer. He had 64 points. However, he did that going 55 for 139 with a 40% kill, hitting a 40% with a 21% efficiency. This is a guy who had a 48% hitting efficiency this year in the Lego volley, and it was rough to watch. As I mentioned, I do think the set quality was hurting him. It was not the set he likes to have that's all the way out to the pin. I think not being able to push and throw or do the Lepke lefty like he used to is hurting him as well. That off speed side of his game was a lot more, and it was clearly affecting him. But to me, I just don't know once again why he wasn't subbed off. It clearly wasn't his week. Honestly, I have no idea. Was Lewis trying to send him a message, or is he only going to go play week one so Lewis makes sure he wants to get out there and get some reps? I felt like I was watching Patrick Roy get hung out to dry while playing for the Canadians against the Detroit Red Wings. It was frustrating to watch. Down the stretch, Lepke has to be the guy, right? When in the biggest situations, he is going to be who we can rely on. But this week just was not his week, and it showed. His passing wasn't great. That's kind of to be expected by Eric Lepke, but him hitting a 21% efficiency is really uncharacteristic for him. Mar, I thought, was a little better. Still not fantastic. Still not classic Stephen Mar like we're used to. His reception, I thought, was really good, past 56% positive and then 50 and 50% positive against France and the US. His hitting numbers were decent as well. His 24% efficiency was really only affected by a poor Germany match, and then Turkey, he was really, really bad against Turkey, going 1 for 7 with a negative efficiency and, getting aced on 4 targets and passing 0% positive. But overall, I liked what I saw from Stephen Mar. We know how he is. We know the player he's going to be. He just clearly wasn't at that level in week number 1. Once again, I'm a broken record about it, but our guys on the bench are really good players. And that's what's most frustrating is that, yes, Mar and Lepke are fantastic, But when you look around the VNL, you see Cuba bringing a young roster. You see Slovenia using 13 different guys and never running the same roster twice, using 5 different outsides. And like these aren't guys who start in good leagues like Brody Hofer, like a Jackson Young, like an Eric Sisna. These aren't guys who are playing Champions League like all of those guys did. So it's crazy that we see other teams like France, like the US, like all these other teams around using different guys, and we don't. Once again, this is the deepest Canadian roster of all time. All of these guys are playing in good leagues. All of these guys are getting big minutes. All of these guys, minus Eric Siskina, who I have full confidence in, have played in the VNL or the World Championships before. Why aren't we using them? But that's as far as I'm going to go on that topic. Now, some of the good things, because we have to talk about some good things. And there was a lot of good things. Once again, that's why it's so frustrating, right? The fact that Canada played so poorly and they played visibly horribly and still had a chance to win every single match, I think is huge, right? At no point were they blown out. They only lost in 5. That's big. Right. I think that's really big. The fact that they were able to get a point out of every single match, have 3 losses and still have 6 points, I think that is really big down the stretch to make the playoffs in the VNL this year. And then also, because only losing 5, like we didn't lose nearly as many playing or ranking points either. That's awesome too. Then next up, blocking. Canada was the best blocking team in week number 1. They led the VNL in stuff blocks with 52. They were second in blocks per set, averaging 2.71 blocks per set. They also led the VNL in positive block touches. So there is a new block touch column when you look at the stats only on the Volleyball World website, not on the Volley Station website. And this is a block positive. So this is essentially a soft block that lands on your side. It's not a block that, goes block out or lands on the other team side. It's just a block touch positive. So they were first in positive block touches with 67. Now, Canada did play the most sets out of any team. They played 19, right? They played at 19 out of a possible 20. Only 2 teams did that, Canada and Slovenia, with 2 very different results. But once again, Canada was tied for second in block touches per set, averaging 3.53 block touches per set. And then overall, they led the VNL in positive block touches. So that is stuff blocks and positive block touches with 119. And they were the first overall in the average as well with 6.26 positive touches and stuffs per set. So blocking was a huge thing. And to me, that really came down to the play of the middles. Jackson Howe was the best blocker in week number 1. And I mean, it was not even close. He had 16 stuff blocks. He had 24 touches for a total of 63 blocks. Awesome by Jackson Howe, especially because he is a guy who actually wasn't even slated to start. It's because Kofi had some back spasms, ended up not playing all week. And I thought Jackson Howe did an incredible job coming in. And our middles were fantastic all around. Howe was also 27 for 38. He hit a 71% with a 61% efficiency, which is absolutely gross. Demyanenko was strong too. He had 11 stuff blocks. He was 27 for 43, hitting a 63% with a 49% efficiency. Altogether, down the middle, Demyanenko and Howe went 54 for 81, hitting a 66.6% with a 54% efficiency. That's huge. And also, part of the reason that Canada was able to run the middle as much as they were is that passing was actually really good through the first 3 matches. It was very uncharacteristic Canada passing, 52% positive, 51% positive, and 50% positive against Germany, France, and the USA, respectively. High numbers in the perfects as well, 25, 27, and 21. Now, the match against Turkey did take a bit of a hit, but that's because our 2 best serve receivers ended up coming off the court. Mar, who was passing, over 50% positive through the first 3 matches, was yanked after the first set and being pretty bad. And Landon Curry, I mean, this is why I think his injury is such a blow to Team Canada. He suffered a knee injury going down mid-rally against Turkey in the last match, and he ended up having to get carted off. He was brought to the hospital and was seen afterwards in crutches. But when you look at some of these numbers that he had in reception, 63% positive, 32% perfect, 53% positive, 21% perfect, 67% positive, 29% perfect. And now, once again, his passing against Turkey wasn't there at all, 21% positive and 7% perfect before he went down. And actually, Zach Hollins was actually an improvement, 39% positive and 22% perfect. But losing Landon Curry is a huge blow to Team Canada. But overall, serve receive, which typically Canada is one of the weakest serve receive teams in the VNL, they are actually one of the better ones and in the upper half of the VNL teams. And that's including the Turkey game where it was just really bad. So yeah, for Canada to be after the 4 matches, 46% positive and 21% perfect, I think that's a huge improvement for this team, and you love to see it. Like serve receive didn't seem to be an issue until the Turkey match. And then finally, I thought Xander Kicinski was incredible. I thought he was really good. I mean, the way he came in against Germany with a 56% efficiency, the way he dominated the match against France. I honestly think one of the biggest problems Canada had in the match against USA is that we didn't go to him that much. I don't know why we don't have the confidence in him that we should. He was like blocked and immediately they would go away from him. He was our leading scorer. They wouldn't set him throughout the second set. Like it was frustrating to watch. But I thought Xander made a really strong case that not only should he be on the roster, but he should maybe be the starting opposite for this team. I think he's dynamic. I think he hits a much faster ball than Show. Not saying that Show can't be the guy either, but I think Xander really put himself in a good position. He hits shots. He can hit down the line. He can go cross court. He can go sharp. He's a very good volleyball player, and he really showed it over the course of this first week. I was really impressed by Xander Kicinski overall. Now, unfortunately, things don't get any easier for Team Canada in week number 2. They have to travel to Slovenia, and in the first match, they play the home team. Then they play a very tough Ukrainian team, Bulgaria, who we know how tough they are, and then have to close out the week against Brazil. But regardless, I do have faith that this team can bounce back. Like I said, I was very surprised with the performance by Canada in week number 1. I thought it should have been better. I know a bunch of you in the comments and otherwise thought it should have been better. And honestly, I think it can be. I think they can go and get a better record in week number 2, despite playing some very tough teams. Now, the roster will be different. Once again, I doubt Landon Curry will be playing. And honestly, I think it's going to be a bit of a toss-up between Zach Hollins and Darian Picklick. From what I was hearing out of camp, those two guys were very, very close. So I would expect, honestly, for them to be pretty interchangeable. I did thought Hollins did a pretty good job coming in his first international appearance, though. And as I've said, and as I've alluded to before, I doubt the full 18 is going to travel. You know, I would be very surprised if we saw both Mar and Lepke travel to Slovenia. Maybe not see Denny Dembinenko, although now with the questionable injury to Kofi, we'll have to see if he plays as well. I'm just expecting a bit of a different roster overall. But regardless, whoever travels, I am hoping we see a little bit of a difference in personnel. I hope Dan Lewis is a little less rigid with who he puts out there and remembers that he has done an exceptional job building this team. Right. And he has had a big hand in the development of guys like Brody Hofer and Jackson Young and Eric Siskina, like those guys who have played for him on the B team. I just hope he can have a little bit more confidence in them because honestly, the rest of us do. Like I've seen your comments. I've seen people talking about the Discord. I know how I feel about these guys. We have the confidence that these guys can go out there and perform. And even if they don't, it would be a really good learning opportunity for them, right? Like if Mar and Lepke are going to go out there and shit the bed, might as well throw out the younger guys to shit the bed and learn from it because we know that the Monza Bros are going to bounce back. But those other guys need that experience. Like finally, this program is at the point where they can play the bench guys and get some guys in and make it a little interchangeable. And I would love to see a little bit more diversity in our set selection. As I said, you know, when you look at the video, and I might, if I have time, I'll see if I can do an offensive breakdown, like comparing the France game compared to the other games, because Luke Herr was slinging it against France. It was like flatter sets. They're going out to the pin. It was giving both Mar and Lepke a better chance. And because of that, it opened some stuff up for Xander on the right side as well. It opened things up down the middle. I would just love to see a bit of it, more diversity in the sets, especially the middles running some different routes other than just a straight on 50 run, you know, whether it's a pop, whether it's a push, whether it's a 31, use the pipe a little bit more. They didn't really use the pipe all that much until they brought in Jackson against Turkey. Like once again, like it's frustrating that none of these things happened in week number 1 because it is well within, the wheelhouse of this team to be able to make plays like that. And ultimately, I just want to see this team go out and play free, fun volleyball. When they're out there having fun, they play great. But there was just so many times where they were just holding the stick way too tight, letting the puck bounce off of it way too strong. And we need to remember that this VNL process is just in preparation. Like, yes, it would be huge to make the finals. It would be massive to make our way up the rankings. But if Canada can go out and beat Cuba at the NORCECA Championships and finish ahead of them, whether it's beat them in the semifinals or the finals, the schedule was actually released today. If they can go out and win that bid at the NORCECA Championships in September in Moncton, it really doesn't matter how well this team does. As long as we don't get relegated, which I think we're almost safe to doing that from now with the 6 points. As long as we don't get relegated, it really doesn't matter. Everything is building towards qualifying for the Olympics in September. And you know what? I'm interested to see how it goes next week for the Maple Volleys.